Okay, Chair, I can confirm that the meeting is now live to the public and being recorded.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Poverty Working Panel on Monday, 26th of April, 2021. I'm your chair, Councillor Megan Armstrong. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. I would like to take this opportunity of thanking all panel members, other members and the public for your understanding during the last 2 weeks following the sad passing of HRH Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh on the 9th of April. The Council was obliged to postpone the previous meeting and all other public meetings during the mourning period, which has now officially ended. So thank you to everyone during this difficult period. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As with all meetings, we are dependent on internet connection and a power supply. In the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we are not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Please keep your points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt when someone is speaking. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda and accompanying reports for today's meeting. Would all members please note that we are now in the pre-election period, formerly known as PERDA, prior to the elections on the 6th of May. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of the members of the working panel. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you. Sue, would you like to take us through the name, please?
Of course. Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Councillor Desarum.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor Rickson.
Present.
Councillor Wibley. Councillor Wibley. Okay. Councillor Woodward.
Present.
Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue. I can confirm we are quorate today. Agenda item 1, public speaking. Do we have any members of the public who have registered to speak today, Sue?
No, we haven't, Chair.
No. Okay, thank you. Item 2, apologies. Could you just list the apologies we have received so far? Thank you.
Yes. Councillor Allen, Councillor Jarvis and Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you. Are there any non-members who have apologised?
Not that I'm aware.
No. Okay.
Chair.
No, thank you. So item 3, declarations of interest. Declarations of interest will be noted by raising your electronic hand. Please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to, if it is a personal or a prejudicial declaration, and state what exactly the interest is, please. I don't see any hands. Do you see any hands, Sue?
No, I don't, Chair.
No, okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, everyone. So item 4, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of March 2021. The draft minutes of the previous meeting held on 15th of March 2021 have been circulated. If any members have comments on the minutes, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no electronic hands raised, I will take it that the minutes of the previous meeting are approved. Just checking again. No,
No, I can't see
No
any hands
hands?
raised, Chair.
okay. Well, thank you, panel. So the minutes are approved. Item 5, discussion paper on the community and voluntary sector. Jamie Buckley. Members will have received this paper from Jamie, who is the Council's Community Engagement and Funding Officer, but unfortunately she's unable to attend and present her paper in person today. However, John Golding has kindly agreed to introduce Jamie's report and will respond to any general questions you may have, and will ask Jamie to respond to any further specific queries after the meeting. Thank you, John.
So thank you, Chair. So hopefully to stimulate some discussion, I'll just go over the highlights of the paper. I think it's well known that community and voluntary groups operating in the district are major players in alleviating poverty in terms of the agenda for today. They support many households who are struggling with budgeting, accessing food, mental and physical health support they provide, dealing with health conditions, seeking employment, etc. So they have a vast range of groups, have a finger in many pies, as it were. The appropriate term that Jamie's put in the paper for the collective of these groups is the voluntary community and social enterprise groups. They're very diverse, as I said. They support across the entire district and rely on an army of volunteers to provide services to our communities. And I know a good number of our members belong to these groups and assist with the support that they provide. They're not-for-profit groups, and as the report says, we know of 627 registered charities and about 204 registered social enterprises. But also many groups are not formally registered in these ways, so the number of groups operating across the district is likely to be much higher. We've signposted to many of these groups on our website, and particularly during the pandemic, they've come to the rescue of many of our residents in the district and done some fabulous work. The number of the groups change, they evolve, they adapt. And it's true to say that we do not have a complete picture of their activity across the district, but Jamie certainly has a good handle on what the groups do and some of the major outputs that they undertake. She's our link, if you like, with these groups, but many other services have also got good contacts with a good number of the groups. For example, in housing, we work closely with a number of charities that provide support, furniture, small grants and such like to our tenants. I think effective partnership between statutory agencies like ourselves and the voluntary sector is one of the best ways of supporting and strengthening our communities. A strong and thriving community and voluntary sector is integral to healthy communities and helps us achieve our statement of intent and probably council plan priority of better homes and better communities. We've given some examples of the type of groups in the district that we work with on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda, and have gone some way to explain the brilliant contribution that these groups have had, particularly during the pandemic, but it does just scratch the surface, I think it's fair to say. The East Devon groups that we've been engaged with are an excellent source of information on poverty, as they're actively working in the communities, and we've sought their feedback on a whole range of issues through our interaction with them. And some of the feedback is set out on page 12 of the report. I think it's fair to say relatively few surprises, but nevertheless, we found it really valuable to hear from them directly. Also in the report, Jamie Buckley goes and explains much of her work around coordinating funding and interacting with the groups. I think it's fair to say that we've taken a light touch approach with the groups that are typically quite robust, very capable. They're often quite self-sustaining, these groups, and wouldn't necessarily appreciate our interference. However, in discussions with a number of the groups, there are several improvements that they would like to see that are within our grasp, and these have been captured on page 15 of the report. So things like improved communication and coordination amongst groups, better partnership working, perhaps a clearer focus on poverty. We've got an opportunity to influence how they operate, some assistance around recruiting, training volunteers, some of the complex legal, safeguarding, health and safety type issues that they have to grapple with. They would quite like some assistance on. And of course, the provision of securing funding, which many of the groups operate as sort of hand-to-mouth existence, really. So would appreciate some support from us on that. There's an entire project here and a case for perhaps adopting a more interventionist role with the community and voluntary groups, and we've captured the key themes that have been emerging from the groups in the action plan, the poverty action plan. And as you'll see from Jamie's report in Appendix 1, I think it is, there is a discussion ongoing with the community and voluntary groups about a CVS or a kind of umbrella coordinating group that might be useful, and we see that in other areas in Devon and beyond. So I think the report concludes that there is a more in-depth piece of work that needs to be done, but could be really useful in building on our long-standing working together activities that we've undertaken with community and voluntary groups. And as I say, I think key thing for me is that their contribution, their work needs to be recognised, valued. I know we value it, and incorporated into our action plan that we'll come on to look at a bit later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John, for that, and thank you for stepping in at relatively short notice to do that. One thing I just wanted to add on to that was about and she does sort of mention it in her report, is about the meetings that we've been having. I think we've had 6 now of meeting with the COVID support groups throughout the district. Only some of them. I'm sure there are a lot more. But we've had a general attendance at these monthly meetings of about between 12 and 20 groups in East Devon, and the idea was just to set something up. It was a previous portfolio holder for COVID who thought it might be a good idea, and also myself. I tend to sort of co-chair it, for those groups, to give them some support, to find out what they needed, and just basically quite an informal setting for them, where we would normally sit around a coffee table and have a discussion. We haven't been able to do that. So that was the idea, that it would just bring those groups together for them to share their experiences, what they've been doing, what they can learn from each other, and how we as a council might be able to help them. So that seems to have been pretty well, and myself and Jamie, who sets these meetings up, and now Councillor Rickson, who comes along as the new portfolio holder with responsibility for COVID. We don't push them to have meetings. It's really up to them. If they don't want another meeting, and we say that at the end of each one, if you don't want to have another meeting, don't feel you have to. It's just here to try and support you. And every time they say, yes, we'd like another meeting in a month's time. So I think it is useful. And normally we would have an annual, I'm trying to remember what the title of it is, John, the annual meeting that we have, that we had the last one.
Working together, isn't it?
Working together, yeah, working together meeting. It's usually in the autumn, and I usually organise that with officers. And of course, we couldn't have one this last year. So that's another partly the reason why we decided to start up this sort of informal grouping, to at least encourage some of those groups and to help them where we can. So that's just a little bit of further background, and some of you may already know about that anyway. But so would anybody, and we're a fairly small meeting today, so I think rather than split up into non-panel members and panel members, I'll just take any comments that people may have about the report. So I've got Councillor Rylands first of all. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank John for your very comprehensive report, and I did want to pull something out of the report that I thought was particularly interesting, and that's certainly corresponded with what we found on a local level. And that's the way you mentioned the fact that actually COVID hasn't necessarily been the cause of some of the problems that we're seeing, but actually has exacerbated them. We were at the stage in Broadclist, probably about 3 years ago, of thinking of setting up things like community fridges and a possible food security system, because we have been aware of people falling between the cracks ever since the universal credit was introduced, and having to live on incredibly tiny incomes, which really don't cover their needs. And so we'd already kicked the idea around of having a community fridge, and also, so we'd had a food share scheme of sorts running out of the church porch for quite some time as well. But obviously, with the arrival of COVID and the loss of people's incomes, having their children at home, and everybody's life changing completely, very, very quickly, everything was precipitated extremely fast. Now, we're really fortunate in Broadclist that we've got an incredibly high achieving clerk who used to work in logistics, and she was able extremely fast to pull a scheme out of the ground that actually picked people up when they needed it. Right at the beginning of COVID, we expected people to need it to be older people who would be self-isolating, but it very quickly became apparent that actually it was a very different profile of person who was going to need help, a lot of help. And I'd say that our clients fall into two broad categories: children, parents with children, and they can be of any age, because if they've been at home, if you've got a bunch of teenagers at home for months on end without free school meals, then that you soon see a massive effect on your income. People whose work depended very much on sort of was quite seasonal, maybe precarious, who were either laid off summarily or lost a lot of hours. People who essentially couldn't work from home. So a lot of us are in the fortunate category of being able to carry on working in our normal jobs from home. For lots of people, that's not the case. And the other category of people that we've seen coming forward, which we kind of weren't really expecting, is people with quite severe mental health problems, who the moment COVID was declared, I mean, I hesitate to use this as an expression, but were essentially dumped on us by social services or by the mental health services, who didn't really know what to do with them, because they're not really set up for supporting people who maybe can't leave their houses because of mental health problems. And so we've been able to step in and really assist people and take some of the worry away. And I think, I think what's crucial about the way we work is that we work in parallel and in communication with other organisations. And I can't stress enough how important it is to share resources and to actually talk to other organisations. And I know that we sometimes get referrals from organisations that our parish clerk has developed links with. And we're able to help people much, much quicker than would be the case if they had to go through sort of mainstream traditional channels. So there's a certain flexibility in the way the voluntary sector is working, but it has to be supported by the more formal sector. So, and the first thing we need to do is we need to know where the schemes are, is the thing, and who they are, who's running them, and develop links with them. Because there's lots we can learn from each other, but also lots that we can do to help each other. I mean, in a total lockdown, nobody's better placed than people actually who live next door or in the same street or in the same village to help people. And so in many ways, COVID has shown us the importance of community in mutual help and self-help, of a community. And so I applaud what you're doing, Megan, and anybody who's involved in bringing in the voluntary organisations and trying to bring them into the fold, because I see that as a really crucial part of what we're doing and how we can actually gain strength by working together. So I did want to thank John very much for the report, and also everybody who's involved in inviting people in and maintaining links with them and checking that voluntary organisations are okay, because essentially they are run by volunteers who probably after a year are tiring. So we need to be mindful of the fact that people have their own lives as well, and they have their own pressures, and they are probably after 13 or 14 months getting really quite tired. So anything that we can do to make people's lives easier is going to help everybody. It's going to help the community. But thank you very much, John. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everybody involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Did you want to comment on any of that, John?
Only to say that we're quite sensitive to the independence of voluntary and community groups, and are treading quite carefully, because we don't want to appear arrogant or imposing ourselves on them, but recognising what Councillor Rylance has just said, that there are certain areas where they're requesting support from us. We have provided quite a lot of funding to food banks, for example, but for me the beauty is, as was just stated, they can be very agile, they can operate quickly, they know people in the communities, they know where to target, and if we work well together, as I said earlier, that will really strengthen our communities. I believe effective working between community voluntary groups and the statutory agencies can be really, really effective.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, is that all right, Eleanor?
Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Woodward. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to Jamie and John for a very comprehensive report, and very interesting reading it is too. Coming at it, I think, from the point of poverty and mental health, I've been thinking sort of on a separate route of having a directory of mental health provision within East Devon. So the services which we have here, and you've mentioned Pinpoint, which is the Devon County sort of directory, and it has 178 mental health services, but that's for the whole of Devon. And you mentioned, or the report mentions, that it took a lot of resource, and also that it rapidly becomes out of date. So the question is whether you would think it would be worthwhile for a sort of written down directory of services, maybe split into subject matter. And obviously I was thinking particularly of mental health, and whether that would be worthwhile for the district to put in place by asking the local services to join into that sort of system. And then people who have needs in particular areas know where to go to look for that.
Yes, very good point. But I think, as has already been mentioned, I think in the report, that they do get out of date. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try to do it.
Yeah.
And I was involved in doing something like this many donkeys years ago, for community and voluntary organisations just in a particular neighbourhood, and that took forever to do that, because there were so many of them, as there are in East Devon, and just capturing them first of all is one thing, and then keeping all the contacts up to date is another. But it's certainly something worth thinking about. Yes, certainly, I'd go for that. But John, have you any thoughts on that?
I'd like to see that myself. Jamie's got a really good handle on what's going on out there, and got some excellent contacts. But as I mentioned, if we were to commission an umbrella type group for all the community and voluntary groups, which we did have with Action East Devon a few years ago, we could have part of their task would be to register, make it as onerous as possible, and offer some support, and that way we would have a better picture of all the activities operating across the district, because they do change rapidly, contacts change rapidly. And just picking up on that point about volunteers becoming tired, we've seen that. We've seen evidence of volunteers that have been working really hard for a year. Many of them have gone back to work after furlough. And that is a thing at the moment. We are conscious of how we might help these organisations recruit new, fresh volunteers to increase the number and reduce the load on the existing volunteer network.
Thank you, John. So is that something that we can put into the action plan, the strategy, or do we need further discussion about that?
I check it's not already there, and I'm happy to add it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, who was that?
Sorry, it was me, Megan, Ian Hall. While we're on this subject, if it's okay, I just want to come in with a couple of comments, please.
Yeah, go on. You're not next on the list, but I'll be very generous to you and let you come in. Thank you, because you've had to miss so many meetings. I'm sorry about that in the past.
Sorry, I'll wait my turn. I do apologise.
No, it's all right. Go on. You.
Okay. First of all, thank you, and I'm sorry of my shift rotor, etc. on the meetings.
Yeah.
All the planets weren't aligned. A couple of declarations. Devon County Councillor, you've already said we're in Purder. I'm also the chairman of a local sports charity which provides education through sport, local lawns, and I'm also vice chairman of ART, which is a unique mental health charity in Axminster. And thank you, Megan. It's really looking at what has been said. Can we get this put in? There is a mental health conference being run by Aaron Clark on the 12th of May, 1 to 4 o'clock, which is the East Devon Mental Health Conference. Thanks to Woodward. I'm sure I'm right in that date, because this is a thread which I've seen, which unfortunately is like a tsunami at the moment. I think it will be for a considerable amount of time. We had enough problems as we were before the pandemic, let alone coming into hopefully a bit of a sunnier time with it. Fingers crossed. But I think you're absolutely correct. We've got to be careful with volunteer burnout. I've been fortunate to be involved in community groups for over 25 years. And I have seen a huge amount of fatigue of people who have been doing this for decades and decades. But also what's very important, and I'm glad to read Jamie's article, and thank you, John, for what you've done, is to ensure that it's important that we don't duplicate. That's also a very important area. And also that openness of voluntary groups is also important, because we know that everyone's really pitching their flag. And I think what we have seen over the last year or so is that there is a massive coming together, not only in our community groups, as Councillor Rylance was saying, but also across the district. And there have been things bubbling up the surface, which has been highlighted because of the pandemic. But I think we're in a really good place. And this area of work has been absolutely fantastic and necessary going forward. So going back to really my main thread, it's about the mental health area. I think from that conference itself, hopefully we'll have some really good evidence as well to see who's out there could actually help with this paper, Megan. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, Ian, for that. Shall we move on to the next speaker, and then I'll invite John just to comment on the last two speakers. Councillor Desarum, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to comment on page 3 of this excellent report produced by Jamie, Project Food, which we see here, and known as HALF and the Exmouth Food Bank. And I think it's very pleasing to see this listed. And I note that the links to our action plan on point 5.6 and 5.7 of our action plan. So what I think is that it says in the action plan, date completion October 21 and September 2021. I'm hoping that when the pandemic is over, the council can take the opportunity to advertise some of these projects based around food, because as it says in the report, people's understanding of the links between the food they eat and the health they get to enjoy. So I think that as well, if I may be so bold as to suggest, your conference could touch on those themes as well and actually promote healthy eating, etc., and food preparation. So that's really what I was hoping to say, Chair, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Do you have any comments, John, particularly on either what Bruce said or what Ian said?
I agree completely, and then we'll pick those up. We'll make sure we pick those issues up.
Yeah, okay, smashing. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments from anybody on this report? They've all been very useful. I'm glad you found it useful, the report. It was quite detailed, wasn't it? But yeah, there's a heck of a lot more we can do with voluntary and community groups. There are, but it's just knowing how to do it in the best way, and we'll certainly put that in the strategy and in the plan. Thank you. I can't see any more hands for that. Oh yes, I can. Councillor Rickson. Thank you, Marianne.
Well, in general, I'm just looking at comments which were about financial awareness and educating people. And there was talk, I think, in this report, I can't find it at the moment, about credit unions. But I think I'm right in saying that there aren't any credit unions in our area. And I looked it up and I saw there was one in Bristol and there's one in Plymouth. Is there anything nearer? Because how do people open an account and go to credit unions rather than to loan sharks if you haven't got a computer?
Yeah, quite. I'm going to put Libby on the spot here if she's listening to this bit, because I know we've talked about. I'm really keen on credit unions, and I know we used to have one in Exmouth years ago, and that came to a grinding halt for various reasons. So, Libby, do you have any comments to make on that at this point?
You're testing my memory here. I do have a.
Do you want me to get you to think about it? Sorry about that.
I might have to come back. I have asked Sharon, my benefits manager, to do some research on credit unions, and we have done some preliminary work. And that maybe is something I can either report back at the next poverty panel meeting. Councillor Rickson is right, there isn't any that are based in East Devon. Some do charge for having accounts with credit unions. We looked at the one in Plymouth, but in order for people to access that, that's quite restricted if you live in East Devon. There's also not all of them are free accounts, so although there might be some may offer cheaper access to loans, actually administering accounts there are costs to some of those schemes, so they're not as straightforward as initially thought, but I can provide an update for the next poverty panel meeting on that, if that would be helpful. Or if you like, I can circulate some notes to yourself, Chair, for you to then disseminate to the group. If that's it's really entirely up to yourself on how best to you want me to come back to you on that issue. So I appreciate it's an important one.
Yeah, I mean, just to members of the panel, would you find it useful to have a sort of a presentation from Libby on this and a proper discussion about it at the next meeting? That's the way I'm thinking, as long as it's not it is giving you more work. I realise that, Libby, but
Well,
is it something that would have to be done anyway?
Well, we've started that work because it was something that we wanted to explore and understand what was our support for people to have an alternative to, so they didn't fall into the trap of payday loans where people haven't got good credit records. So that is something we have got some information that we will be able to share. I just don't have it to hand.
No, that's
apologies
fine,
for that. But I can definitely, if people want, we can definitely bring something back to the next meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, is that all right with everybody? I'm just looking for
Could I just ask? Is credit union really the only option? Is there nothing else at all for people who need this sort of support?
We've looked at we are looking at other options as well. So I can come back to you on that one as well. Yeah, the wider issue of how people can access whether more affordable loans and cheaper accounts.
And education.
And education, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Marianne. That's really useful, actually. And it'd be good to have a really good discussion about it. Councillor Gazard, Steve, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, unfortunately, Councillor Brewster Sarum stole my thunder, Chair. I know he's got very good eyesight, so he must have been looking at my note. But I really do hope that the working together conferences will, as and when, will get back together, because I think that is an excellent way of meeting our volunteers. And as John praised Steve very well in his presentation, is that they do want some help, and unfortunately, like a lot of us, we don't like asking for help. And sometimes when you're in a meeting, a conference, it's easier to maybe mention it and feel not so embarrassed of asking for help. But I know we're all waiting to see what's going to happen with meetings, but hopefully if we are still having Zoom meetings, perhaps it would be helpful if we could maybe have a couple of conferences later on in the year, Chair.
Wow. Yeah. Conferences by Zoom. It's not ideal, really, is it? But
no.
we'll do our best.
I know you will.
Let's keep our fingers and toes crossed and hope that things improve and we can actually meet face to face. That's the best way. But yeah, thank you. Good point made. Right, where are we now? Right, Councillor Hall again. Yeah, thank you. Ian?
Thank you. And I'm sorry if this has been mentioned in previous meetings, but I'm always, as we all are, looking from the lens of those people who are in need. We all agree this has been absolutely fantastic, but about the messaging under education, we know that there's a possibility that those people we're trying to reach out to ultimately try to help them help themselves and help their families, is they may have areas of reading difficulties, or they may have sight problems or what have you. And I'm just asking, has it been considered? Because now we have really good technology and we've had to use it over the last year. We've been forced into different ways of working. Is there any possibility with the resources and the skill set, we could actually put out some really bite-sized podcasts regarding most people have technology in their pockets. We know that. Now, as in when we have a link, say to licensing or what have you, we can look through loads of writing. But we actually had something like a podcast, which could be linked to the East Devon website. And keeping in mind, we already have the app system. Has that ever been considered, putting out these little posts? As an example, food banks. In Axminster, we have food banks at the Wellbeing Centre. And as Councillor Rylance was saying in Clis, if it's mental health, we have Pete's Dragon say in Exmouth with bereavement. And in ARC, in Axminster, we have that support as long as this is within referral from your doctors for bereavement, loss or trauma. And I'm just wondering, because that would be really, really effective. Because as I said, some people struggle to read, and this could be a good way of engaging with people. Just a couple of minutes bite size on any given subject, keeping in mind, as it's already been stated, a lot of this can be outdated, and this would be an easy way it can be refreshed. Just a consideration, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. Yeah. What do you think to that idea, John? Have we got the technology? That's what I haven't got a clue about podcasts. I have to put my hand up and say I just don't know. But I'm sure somebody might have that possibility and skill. And whether it is it a cost implication, or is
It's
it
pretty
something
cheap. Pretty cheap.
Is it worth thinking about? Anyway, my gut feeling is yes, we should think about it, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a number of requests for podcasts, short films on, I can think of refuse and recycling, on some of the climate change stuff. We used to have a digital communications officer. That person hasn't been in post for a little while, but I think we're going to recruit to that at some point. So if there is a need for those sorts of things for people that are finding it hard or impossible to read, then let's test it and see if there's a level of interest that justifies translating some of our written material into easily digestible podcast type material.
Yeah. Good idea. Thank you for that. We've got some good ideas coming up today, haven't we? It's brilliant, isn't it? Thank you. Don't know if I should say that as chair, but who else have we got? Councillor Woodward again.
Yep. Sorry, me again.
All right.
In that context of sort of, as Ian very well suggested, about podcasts and little bite-sized bits on our website, I've had a brief discussion with the a drug and alcohol charity in East Devon, and to see whether they would exactly do that, provide some form of visual and auditory input, which we could make available. Well, initially I thought of it for our members, but it could actually go wider to residents as well. So there are lots of areas where we could have diverse input, and I thought drugs and alcohol was a particular area of interest related to poverty and one of the effects of arising from poverty.
Yes. Thank you. And so the thing for me is, when you're trying to think about doing something new like this, you have to think of what the categories would be, what headings we would want, what topics, such as drug and alcohol, food banks, mental health, what topics we would want mainly covering, and that might be something that we can discuss at a future meeting. I don't know what other people think, but I think just to have a bit of a think about that and a discussion, so that we're concentrating on the ones that are really, they're all important, I know, but the ones that are perhaps more important than others, at least to start with. What do people think of that idea? I'm just thinking of John. I'm just trying to think of a way of doing some of the donkey work so that officers don't have to do this. And I think as members, we're probably as much aware, if not more aware, than some officers of what the needs are out there in our own local communities. And so to make some kind of list and heading of what those issues are that may be made into a podcast. Is that a way forward? And then we can take that back to officers and see how that fits.
Yeah.
Or you may have a different way of looking at it altogether.
Oh, we already had some good suggestions. I think with something new like that, we perhaps pilot it and see how it goes down. If there's lots of people that are interested in it and listen to it, then we can extend it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for all those great ideas, everybody. Wonderful. Right, who have we got? We've got Councillor Hall again.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I think I'm like a whirlwind today. And really, with what Councillor Woodward was saying, what I'm always trying to look at, common threads. We know that there's a lot of threads through all our communities which are very similar. Now, with what Councillor Woodward is saying, like in Axminster, we have Axminster Together, alcohol, drugs support. We also have mental health. And if you've got common threads, it'd be easier, should I say, to look at what would have the maximum benefit to the people we're trying to reach out for. We know that there is a really big chance, a more increased chance, that somebody who's under drugs and alcohol, should I say, is possibly going to have more issues with mental health. And it goes on. So you could look for those threads across multi subjects that could really reach out as a benefit with a pilot. And I do think this could be a pilot. Also, while you're there, Chairman, while I've got it, I promise I will be quiet in a minute. And this may be interesting, and I know that Councillor Woodward would especially be interested in this. Last week, I undertook a 2-day course of the most amazing 2-day course I've ever been on, which has become a mental health first aider. And oh my word, if I ever thought that I knew quite a lot about mental health, I was absolutely blown away. And with the mental health first aid training, keeping in mind with what we are trying to do with our communities, have I found it beneficial? Oh my, going forward, we're not professionals. I'm not a professional clinician. I don't want to get that wrong. But the overarching common understanding of people or going through any difficult areas of journeys in their life, this has been so impacting that I never thought in my 51 young years that it would have such an impact. And all I would say is I can see such a benefit for me. And I think to myself, if we couldn't multiply that by 60 in our district, it would really, really help. Our overarching area is to help people and communities to help themselves. And I just thought I'd bring that flavour, Fred, and I will be quiet. I'm sorry.
No, you're all right. No, Ian, just to come back to you. So can you tell us, are you able to tell us who ran this training, when you did it and who ran it?
Yeah, this was an organisation called Greenleaf. Okay,
right.
And they are Somerset based, but they are working on behalf of Public Health England. So this is the big major organisation. There is worldwide, I think there's over 4 million now mental health first aiders, and the idea is really to have 1 per 70, I think, population in the end. But I mean, they are looking at this as urgently as much as a physical first aider, a mental first aider now. So that means if I'm in work, outside of work, in the community, I will be wearing a badge, a lanyard, that I'm able to help and support people and really be able to look at the areas of signs and difficulties, because we've got to be absolutely honest, lifting the stigma of mental health is still a bit of a journey to go. But crikey, aren't we a lot further on we were 20, 30 years ago? But I would absolutely endorse anybody trying to do this. And the lady who ran it, the course was absolutely amazing, so engaging. And all I would say is, all for a few quid, it would be really beneficial for us as a district council. And I just think, wow. I mean, if I found this much benefit, and I mean, I was somebody who suffered really badly for over 10 years with mental health, but oh my, have I learned so much about myself in this course. And everybody said, there was 11 of us on this course, and every single person said they have learned so much about themselves. They wish they had this training when they were 20. Anyway, so New Leaf is the organisation. If you need any details, further details offline, feel free to email me, Megan, and I'll be happy to put them.
Can you just forward them on to me? Any details you've got, please? Would you mind?
It'd be an absolute pleasure, Megan. I'll write it down
lovely.
there.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, smashing. Right. I haven't got anybody else on the list. Final call. Anybody else want to comment on Jamie's report? Anything at all? John, have you got anything else you want to add, or just add all these things onto your ever-growing list for the plan? Right, lovely. Shall we move on then? Is that okay with everybody? thank you everybody for those contributions. Really, really good. So now I want to thank John particularly for covering this item in Jamie's absence as well. If you can just record my thanks for that. So item 6, the draft poverty strategy and updated action plan by John Golding. So you will have received both these documents, and I'll now invite John again. He's got a starring role this afternoon to give his presentation both on the draft poverty strategy, which we've been working towards during the last few months, and the updated action plan. Thank you, John. I have a feeling you may have a PowerPoint there. Am I right on that?
Yes, I'm going to try and share my screen. Oh no, it tells me the host is disabled. Can you make me co-host, Sue, or something that enables me to share my screen?
Yes, of course, John. Hang on.
Okay.
Where are you? We're just finding you on the list. Oh.
Hopefully that will do the trick.
Yes, it should do. Yes. I can't find you. Hang on a sec. Oh, yes. Okay. There you go.
It don't seem to be letting me.
You are definitely co-host.
No, it won't let me. Have you got it, Sue, the presentation?
No, I haven't.
I sent it to Sarah. Oh, hold on. Here we go. How's
Oh, magic.
Does that look more promising?
Yeah, lovely, yeah.
Wow, good.
Yeah, well done.
It was me. It must have been me. So lots of words and action plan to consider for the panel. So I thought I'd try and make it easy, or hopefully come to life a bit through a few slides. Not too many. You'll be glad to hear. But for me, the panel, the working panel, is coming to a conclusion of one of its key purposes, really, which we were set up to produce a strategy, and I think we're getting there. We're nearly there. We've had some more ideas this afternoon that I can build into the draft documents that you've got. But we've been through a journey together in terms of evidence gathering, sharing of good practice, a whole range of contributions that have come in to help us shape a poverty strategy. As I say, I think we're nearly there. We've been building on our existing work, and I was just moving towards a more coordinated approach to poverty alleviation, reduction, and making this a high priority for the council. So some of the things that we've looked at in terms of our stated aspiration that came up as a council motion probably 2 years ago now, and I've summarised that in this particular slide, where we want to, you're committed to stamping out poverty, and we recognised early on, as we've been talking today, that to achieve this, we will need to have a collaborative approach, working with a variety of partners. So the panel was set up, established. We had a bit of a delay before starting off on our journey, partly COVID related, and as we got used to doing virtual meetings, the panel have met pretty much monthly since October, I think it was. And as we say here, one of the key purposes of the panel is to produce and recommend to Cabinet and council a poverty strategy. And so I think we're well on the way to that. So we had these meetings, 7 meetings. This slide summarises the things that we considered at each of those meetings, including today's meeting in April at the bottom. We looked quite carefully at terms of reference and what I refer to as a sphere of influence in terms of what we could and couldn't do on our own and what we needed partners to do. And then we looked at Joseph Rowntree material that are big contributors and organisations committed to stamping out poverty. We spent some time looking at their work, and then we had a variety of contributions from external partners and our own services. Our service leads in a number of cases have attended and given kind of evidence for us to consider and incorporate into the strategy. This slide really summarises some of the key approaches and learning that we've taken. So again, just to summarise that, we felt it was important to look at the root causes of poverty and how we might prevent poverty, being clear on those issues that can be addressed by us and those issues that we need partners or we need to lobby for changes in social policy legislation, for example. And then one of the key themes that you'll see in the strategy is that recognition of a need to build capacity and resilience of our residents and communities, and I'll touch on that some more. In the early meetings, we spent some time looking at what sometimes is a quite confusing range of definitions for poverty. We looked at different types of poverty and some of the different governments, including our own definition of poverty, which is that 60% below average household income. And I think it's fair to say we considered quite a wide-ranging view of poverty and have tried to define that in the strategy, define what we mean. I think it's important in terms of poverty that we are clear what we're talking about. Then we looked at this model, the main causes and effects of poverty, and we recognised some of the causes on the left-hand column and the impact or the effect that has on the right-hand column. Not an exhaustive list, but some of these things we've already been talking about at our meeting today have been important to incorporate into the drafting of the strategy. I've also used the report many of you will remember, quite a comprehensive report that was pulled together by Libby and Amy back in November 2019, where we found that for a relatively affluent district in the southwest, a significant number of our people are living below this poverty line of median income, and it translated into something like over 10,000 households, which, just doing simple maths and assuming average household numbers for East Devon, 2.2 people per household, it meant that nearly 24,000 people in East Devon were in poverty. So it's an issue affecting a significant number of people. I suppose that demonstrates. This sphere of influence slide I've included in the draft strategy, and I think it's important in terms of us recognising where our services that we provide, that we have control over, can have a direct influence on poverty, but also working through some of the things that we've been touching on this morning, this afternoon rather, partnership working, the role of community and voluntary groups, and then as the sphere widens, right out to government policy and in fact, international policies. So we've been clear all the way along through the the journey building up a strategy that we recognise where we have direct influence and where we need to work effectively with others. Again, we agreed early on some principles to guide us as a panel and will be incorporated into the strategy, and that's about addressing cause and effect of poverty, this balancing of partnership working and influencing type activity, and then building capacity so that poverty is reduced in the district. And again, that's a theme or three themes that feature throughout the draft strategy. And then early on, again, in the work of our various meetings, we agreed these 5, what I referred to as high-level themes, and then we unpacked each one at different meetings. So I think the last meeting we looked at housing, which theme 4 covers in some detail. Previous to that, we've looked at health and poverty, indebtedness, financial resilience. We've covered each of these in quite detail. And then when I've structured the action plan, you'll have seen that the actions that flow from these 5 themes. So to me, there's a kind of proper structure and logic to what we're proposing. This slide really just emphasises that poverty, we recognise quickly in our work, is very much a cross-cutting issue for the council. There are 4 main services that contribute towards alleviating poverty, but there are others that can support that as well. And as I say, each of the themes, those 5 themes, are explored in the strategy, and I think it's fair to say, and we've had discussion about this, that the strategy builds on work that we already do. So whilst one of the effects of producing a strategy will help us prioritise and coordinate better, it is fair to say that a number of our services have been working on this for some time. These are the main services, those 4 services that I mentioned, that are going to make a significant contribution towards poverty reduction, and each of the services that are shown on this slide have come to the panel or regularly attend the panel and have given presentations and critically, helpfully for me, have inputted into the shaping of that action plan that we've looked at each of our meetings. So the strategy contains a narrative, and the actions are obviously in the action plan, which contains a variety of interventions, projects, commitments from us, and is stretching us, because some of those things in the action plan we already do, but we want to stretch ourselves and make that those interventions even more effective. And then I've just, in this last bullet point on this slide, just summarised those 5 high-level objectives, which for me are very much around improving financial resilience, reducing indebtedness, ensuring that income, including benefits, are sufficient for households in the district, strengthening family and community support, making sure that housing is affordable, suitable, that people can afford to heat their homes, and that the link between poverty and health equality is improved. So we've also, or I've also in drafting the strategy, tried to align them with the council's statement of intent and those 4 big themes that we're discussing in the council plan workshops at the moment, and you'll see that in the strategy narrative. So the challenge for us and the strategy, I feel, is to reduce that level of poverty that we've measured previously, reduce the number of households that are in poverty. And I think, again, we've discussed at one of the panel meetings how we create a poverty dashboard to monitor our progress. And I know Libby and some of her colleagues are working on that at the moment, and that will be a commitment in the strategy. Understandably, and I suppose a bit of a health warning, that our ambitions will necessarily be constrained by what we can afford to do as a council. Our finances are under pressure. What I'm suggesting to you is that resourcing will not affect the what we do, but perhaps the pace that we deliver the actions and objectives. The more resources that we have devoted to this area of work, and any secondments that we can make internally to get our staff focused on these areas in these various services that I mentioned, will enable us to proceed at a pace. And so what I'm hoping you agree that the action plan is a set of realistic actions and interventions that we can afford as an authority to deliver. So hopefully that's put the strategy narrative and the action plan into some sort of context for the panel. It's the culmination of the work that you've been doing over these last 7 meetings. I think we've got there relatively quickly, but we've done a thorough piece of work, and I feel that we've got that balance right in terms of there was cause to get this in place quickly, but I think as a panel you've gone about the evidence gathering, the listening to various groups and experts in the right way, so that we are now ready, subject to your final input and discussions, to present a strategy and action plan to the cabinet, and something that we can be proud of. And then I suppose it's fair to say the hard work really begins, because we have to implement it. So happy to answer any questions, Chair. Thank you. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you, John. That's really good. Thank you very much for all the really hard work you've put into this. Not only you, but all our officers as well who have been involved in this and have inputted over the last few months. Do you want the questions on the whole thing, on the action plan and the strategy, or did you want them separating out, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter to me.
No. Okay, fine. Right, lovely. Thank you. Who have we got now? Got Councillor De Sarum first. Thank you.
Oh, thank you indeed. What I think, John, that's a really splendid document that you've produced, which has reflected all our hard work and effort that's gone into it. Might I suggest on an amendment onto the actual action plan based on your objective 2 that we've got in para 2.6. Can I suggest that it says ensure that the council's environmental improvement programs include schemes in more deprived wards, and can I add in whilst maintaining support in both Little and Honiton and St Paul's, as it quite clearly says on your document, because I wouldn't want, obviously it's important to get more deprived wards in, but I wouldn't want any support removed from either Little or St Paul's, and hopefully that document would reflect that. Thank you, John. I wonder what you think.
Yeah.
To build that in, I'll just making a note of that.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just clarify that? Did you add in Exmouth and Honiton there, Bruce?
Well, if you think Exmouth, it's just that on para 2.6 it says more deprived wards, and in the other document, East Devon's district anti-poverty strategy, it talks about, according to the government's index of multiple thing, the 2 most deprived areas are Little and Small. So what I didn't want to do is see any emphasis shifted away from there. Obviously, I quite get and understand that we need to make more deprived wards have more support, but I wanted to make sure that the other existing wards that we've already identified don't suffer any worse.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. The only thing I was just going to mention on those, John, where we talk about the objective 2, the 2 most deprived, whether we should actually identify, because some people reading this won't have a clue where Littleholm or St Paul's is. Do we need to just clarify that Littleholm's in Exmouth and St Paul's is in Honiton? Or does it not matter?
Yeah. No, I'll do that.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And just quickly, the other thing I just wanted to, and other people might point this out as well, is on, there are no page numbers on this that I've printed out. There were page numbers on it originally, but they've not printed off. So under objective 1, where you've still got question marks about the weekly pay, the one in blank people receiving weekly pay blank pounds, blah, blah. Presumably all that will be filled in when it's finally drafted, yeah?
Yeah, that's the intention.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for a few last bits of input from some of the colleagues.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's great. Where are we now? Let's have a look. Councillor Arnott, please. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Megan, very much. You remind me of myself there, putting your glasses on, trying to see one of these yellow hands. I'm sorry I'm in the dark, bad broadband, but also I've just had the worst haircut I've ever had. The only thing worse than not having a haircut for 4 weeks is going to a barber's you've never been to before. Anyway, I can't hide forever. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to come to a question, but if I may, because perhaps nobody else will, just thank you, Megan, so much for the patient way in which you have worked with John and other officers to get us to this point. Very one foot put in front of the other over the last 8-9 months in particular. And I think the timing of this, as John has said, it's dovetailing really nicely in with the council plan as well. So thank you for that, and I hope all members will appreciate it. I know you get some knocks sometimes, and also thank you to the members from all parties who've been part of this all the way through. And that's been a great example to the rest of the council, I think. The question is, John, in terms of, is there a way that eventually we'll be able to measure our expectation of what extra demand there might be on us directly? In other words, let's say, for sake of argument, what we do is we publicise this work in due course, because the figures that you've come up with are extraordinary for the number of people, for just the proportion of people living in East Devon who are in this predicament. And in a way, you don't want to bandy that around, but on the other hand, it's a very important thing for people to understand. At that point, perhaps then hopefully the people of East Devon, come to an even greater awareness that they've got a council that does care about this. What do you expect then to happen? Do you think calls will come in? I mean, how does this go, do you think?
Difficult question. I believe that we can deliver this action plan, but for me, the key thing will be the speed of which we can deliver it. So I think with some realignment of our existing resources and a greater focus, once it goes through Cabinet and Council, presumably gets built into the council plan, then that will enable myself and colleagues to ensure that we've got sufficient resources devoted towards it. I guess as it gains momentum, well, I've already said it'll be really important that we monitor it carefully, the impact, and so I'd like to see some good evidence of the numbers that I've quoted going down as we implement these measures, and so we can get a sense of our success. And then my guess is that we need to keep refreshing, keep these documents live, as no doubt different challenges, different problems will occur, and ensure that we look to bid for resources where their opportunities arise. We've had a few opportunities that have already come our way that we've exploited, some around the COVID monies that have been made available. just so that we can roll this out in a sensible timescale.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that all right, Paul?
That's lovely, Megan. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. An excellent document, John. Even I could understand it, well presented, and I think it will be something that everybody will be able to understand. I picked up your point about resources. I mean, obviously, we're going to hope that as a council that we are going to make a big difference in the number of people that are in poverty, and as Paul has said, that hopefully will bring the numbers down. But as we've got the leader here, I mean, would you be expecting that there'll be some? I mean, do we need a pot of money from the council to be able to resource all the work that this is going to entail? Or I know you did say that there was some monies from some little grants that you've got already, but would you be looking for extra resources? Because I mean, I think if you need the extra resources, we've got to get cabinet to take it on board and then take it to council. But I think it's important that you have the resources to do the job.
Through you, Chair, before John says which bit of the back of Simon's sofa is going to find this money in, just to say two things. I think it's obvious. I think cross-council, there'd be a will to find the money for this if we possibly can. I think that's the first thing. I think there's a unity. And I'm particularly mindful in this meeting of the kind of things that Ian and Bruce have been saying, and that both Mikes have been saying as well, in these meetings in the past. And I think the second thing is quite clear, which Andy is very aware of, Andy Wood and Simon as well. There are these funds that are popping up all over the place. And I think we do have the positive attention of the MPs at the moment as well. So hopefully there may be more money available for it. That's my perspective. But what do I know? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. John, would you like to respond to that from Steve?
Yeah, so we did put a marker down when we did the budget. Simon incorporated into his report some, I suppose, health warnings, if you like, to say that the work of the panel was likely to impact on the budget. So I think we've got a slight in there in terms of future budget. I think there will need to be some modest provision for implementing some of the projects in the action plan, and some of it can be done through alignment of resources, existing resources. We've talked in the past that in the panel that Libby's got a couple of financial resilience officers, I think we called them, Libby, where again they'll be working on this area of work. I've got some flexibility in housing to perhaps align some resources. And for me, as I say, when I report to Cabinet, hopefully if you sign this off today, we'll get this to Cabinet fairly quickly with the changes that you've commented on today. Again, one of the points that I'll be making is that for me, this is all deliverable. The resourcing will determine the speed with which we can deliver a lot of these actions from the action plan. But I fully recognise this topic, if you like, will be competing with resources for climate change, resources for leisure, culture, tourism, all the array of competing demands that we have. So I've tried to make it a realistic and deliverable strategy and action plan.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That's great. Is that all right, Steve?
Yeah. Could I just make a comment?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, can I just say I'm really grateful for Councillor Arnott's input there, and for what John has said, because I think, you know, this is extremely important for us as a council to get to the root causes of poverty and to make lives better for everybody. So please, John, if you need extra money, just ask, and I'm sure you won't be shy in coming forward.
Well done, well said, thank you. Right, we've got Councillor Rylands next, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank all the team really for this report, which I think is super comprehensive and excellent. I really welcome the focus that's in it. And as an aside, I just wanted to point out that we can actually tackle climate change and poverty at the same time in some ways, by, for example, insulating people's homes or installing more energy efficient methods of heating. And so we could actually, you know, tick two boxes, tick two aims at the same time on some of these. And do things that would actually help people, you know, and also meet our climate change aims. So I actually had a question really, and I'm slightly concerned about the use of the term involuntary poverty as one of our council aims. I just wonder if anybody with a longer memory than me can remember how we ended up with that term as a council aim, because to me it brings to mind the notion that if we have involuntary poverty, then we also have voluntary poverty. Now, I don't know very many people who voluntarily live in poverty. I mean, maybe a few orders of monks might deliberately decide to live in poverty, but apart from that, I don't see any poverty as voluntary poverty. So I'm just rather concerned that gives a bit of a sort of moralistic get out to people judging people's cases as to whether or not their poverty is voluntary or involuntary, and whether we should tackle it. So I'm just wondering, can anybody remember how we ended up putting that term into our council document and what it was at the time? Because to me it just seems like a fly in the soup. You know, we should be not just what we decide is involuntary. I mean, it just sounds like deserving and undeserving poor to me. It sounds like 19th century.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor. I must say, where's she gone?
I'm still here.
All right. Yeah, I have questioned this myself in the past, and it seems about 20 years ago since we agreed this statement, and I know I think I voted against it at the time at council. But John, would you like to clarify it? I'm sure you can bring a lot more clarity to it than I can, please.
Well, you're right. It is a motion from council. And I suppose it's set the journey off really, and the work of the panel. We did debate it fiercely at the time, and I didn't like the reference to 2 years. It seemed arbitrary to me, because alongside the involuntary poverty, it says something along the lines of nobody should be in poverty for more than 2 years. But that is what council resolved, so I thought I ought to properly reflect that in the strategy. But yeah, not everybody was in agreement at the time. I think the good thing is it highlighted the issues, and it, as I say, it set us off on this journey.
So this, just taking the bull by the horns here, just talking about this involuntary poverty bit, I've never really understood that, I must say. But it was what we agreed, as you say, at council. Can anybody else remember why that term came up, and what it means? I'm sorry, I should know this, but I'm afraid I don't. I've never understood it really. No?
Nobody. Oh, I feel emotion coming on then.
Megan,
I think it was emotion at the first time round. It was emotion. That's what got us into this. Oh, sorry. Somebody. Who's that? Glasses on. Yeah, Tony. Yeah.
Could I just comment on that? You could have somebody who is voluntarily falls under the sort of categories that we've given of 60% below the average. If you took somebody who is living off grid, who chose to live off grid, say in a teepee in a field, without much money, but they can actually manage perfectly well and are very happy to do that because that's their life challenge, that's the quality of life they want, then they would be in that situation voluntarily. So, and they probably wouldn't want the assistance because they don't feel they need the assistance. So there are a limited number of people, obviously, who would see that as a much better quality of life and therefore don't consider themselves to be in poverty, because although they don't have money, they have many other aspects to their life which they think are valuable. So there could be some people who are voluntarily in a situation which fall into the definition, and therefore that's maybe why we have the involuntary and the voluntary.
Yeah,
They
yeah, that's a
come
good,
within
good
the
explanation,
definition.
actually.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor, for asking that question. We've got Councillor Chapman. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, John, thank you. Good report. On resources, I'm back on my hobby horse. Have you heard anything about the government money put forward for domestic abuse and helping victims? We have discussed it before. I understand you were looking at it, and we were waiting for the government report. Could you give me an update, please?
Yeah, can do. So most of the money went to upper tier authorities for very specific duties under the Domestic Abuse Bill. Our allocation at East Devon was 32,000, so quite a modest amount. But say most of the money's gone to county, and we are working closely with county on a number of projects because they've got quite specific duties, the upper tier authorities, under the new legislation. And we're working with them to naturally reduce the incidence of domestic violence or deal with it effectively when it does occur.
What does that include? Rehousing, maybe being able to buy more properties for assistance, or?
Well, yeah, the 32,000 that we get won't go very far.
No, I realise, but
that is one of our tools that we use.
Yeah. But I mean, 32,000 to spend on bed and breakfast isn't, I am just wondering if we should be lobbying for more money to buy sort of premises to house domestic abuse. I don't know how that's going.
So we've got some property that we can use. You know that we've acquired some multi-use properties in Exmouth, Sailors Rest, and our property in Moulton Road, where in emergency situations we can provide a place of safety, I suppose, essentially, in an emergency situation. But our drive, again, through the council plan at the moment, to deliver more social housing is going to be absolutely key, because although we can create sort of a place of safety, the important thing is we're able to move victims of domestic violence on quickly to resettle, get kids back in school and that sort of thing, all the disruption that domestic violence can cause. And critically, the new duties are going to be a lot around trying to prevent it in the first place, which has got to be the best focus if we can work with county to educate, train, guide, all of those things that might help prevent some of the incidents of domestic violence that we see.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you for that, John. Thanks, Maddie. Oh, I don't think I've got, I have got another hand. Ian Hall, thank you.
Thank you. Going on with John was saying there was the areas of the root causes, and not trying to reinvent the wheel, and always trying to build upon the success of what East Devon has had for many years. The community engagement have always, in my opinion, especially in this area where I represent, John, have always been that extra pair of eyes and ears to really alert and really look at multi-agency approaches as much as needed when needed, because obviously this rings true to the prevention, early intervention help, which is very, very important, especially at the time of need. With Switch being a little bit hamstrung, like so many other organisations within East Devon since the pandemic started, will we as a council with the housing revenue account be looking at supporting the community engagement going forward and with Switch? Because I just feel if we are not, then we're going to have to replace it with other pairs of eyes and ears. I mean, we as a 60, obviously we're in touch with our communities, or trying our best, but it seems that we do have really good practices in place, and it is an area which is born out of trust, and trust takes many, many years to actually develop. And we've had some superb success stories that we've actually seen families being kept together rather than being separated, and siblings being separated. But this could only be because of the early intervention support from East Devon, and be that as county, and be that as the local police teams as well. And where Maddie was saying about the domestic violence area, again, multi-agency support, early indicators are incredibly important. So is there the threads regarding community engagement going to be really reactivated as soon as possible? Because our children, the most precious in society, I'm sure we'd all agree, giving them every chance to flourish, and ensuring that they have really good arms around them at any given time needed, John. If you don't mind me asking that for you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. John?
Yeah, so the community engagement officers that we have paid for through the housing revenue account, there's a ongoing commitment to maintain, if not develop, that service even further. We've seen the effect, the positive effect that they can achieve over a good number of years now. It must be 10, 12 years that we've had those 5 or 6 officers in place. We recognised the need for community development some years ago, and the reason that we funded it through the housing revenue account is because we could afford to do so through the housing revenue account, and the focus of those community development officers has been on our estates in the main, but not exclusively. There is every intention to continue that work, and in fact, those same community development officers during the COVID pandemic have been doing work in our community support hub, because a lot of their activities of face-to-face type activities have had to be put on hold. We've redeployed them in other ways, and I know Councillor Hall is aware of some of the food supply initiatives that they've been working on in Axminster and elsewhere. So we used them to good effect, but we're all looking forward to the day when they can regather with their groups. They work with a lot of young people, a lot of older people, but a lot of it is face-to-face type work. So we're looking forward to the day that we can go back to that, and the budget process has confirmed ongoing support for that activity that we have through those community development workers.
Thank you, John. Is that all right, Ian, for now?
As always, brilliant, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right, see if we can move on. I don't think I've got any more questions for John, but I guess if you've got anything burning that you suddenly remember afterwards, John, people can just drop a line to you, me, both of us, to be included. But we've got a fairly tight time scale, I think, to try and get it to the next cabinet, this, have we? So we just need to crack on with it, really.
Well, that's my plan. So I plan to incorporate the changes that have been mentioned today and get it to the next available cabinet. If I'm really quick, and with the leader's permission, we could get the 12th of May cabinet, and then it becomes part of the council's policy framework. You've got a proper strategy in place and we can get on with implementation. So that's the plan, Chair.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. That's great. Right. Well, thank you very much. Oh, have I got another? Oh, I've got the leader, Paul Arnott. Please, Councillor Arnott, quickly. Yeah.
Thank you, Willie. I don't know about that. Yeah, all right. No, just responding to that through you, Megan. Thank you. Yes, if you can do it for the 12th, John, it would be extremely welcome on that agenda. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that, Paul. Thank you. Right. Well, thanks a lot, John. Very much. We've all thanked you, and I'd also like to thank you, all the officers that have been involved, the ones that come to meetings, and the ones that are behind the scenes. And the members of this panel, because without you all, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So thank you very much, all of you. And thank you particularly, John, for all the work you've done on the draft strategy and the
It's been
action
a real
plan.
team effort.
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope so, yeah. Right, well, shall we move on then? Because Libby's been patiently waiting till the end of this meeting to speak. Breathing space regulations, Libby mentioned this at the last meeting as an important contribution to our strategy and action plan. So I'd now like to ask you, Libby, to introduce and explain these new breathing space regulations. And have you got a PowerPoint? Yes, you have a PowerPoint. Well done. Thank you already.
Thank you, Chair. And by magic, I didn't have to do anything. So thank you, Wendy, for being on the ball there. Yes, just to explain, breathing space becomes law on the 4th of May. This is part of the new regulations that are coming in, referred to as the debt respite scheme, but will be commonly referred to, no doubt, as breathing space. It was part of the government's manifesto. Sorry, bear with me, I'm having some technical issues. It was part of the government's manifesto to support people who are in problem debt by giving a moratorium for them to access debt advice. So, Wendy, if you could just sort of move on for me, please, onto the next slide. Thank you. So alongside breathing space, the government are also looking to legislate for a statutory debt repayment plan. These will be positive measures to support people who are in debt. And we know from the work that we've just talked about with the level of indebtedness, this is a significant issue, not only nationally, but within East Devon as well, and often can be a significant problem for why people are financially struggling, especially if they're tied up with high interest debt, and it stops them being able to feed themselves whilst they're trying to service those debts. So breathing space, as I mentioned, it is giving people a moratorium whilst they seek professional debt advice. It lasts for 60 days. However, there is a slightly different scheme for those that have mental health crisis, and that will last for a longer period. It will actually last for the duration of their mental health crisis plus 30 days. This is a scheme that will be managed by the Insolvency Service, but a debtor will be linking in with a debt advice provider, someone who is regulated, or it could even be a local authority. So they will engage with a debt advisor. It doesn't write off the debt, but there isn't a fee that a person will have to pay in order to access breathing space. Whilst someone is accessing though breathing space, what it does do is it freezes that debt, and it also prevents creditors from being able to pursue or continue with recovery action whilst someone has entered breathing space. So any ongoing charges for interest or recovery, if we're in the middle of taking a debt debtor through the courts, we would have to stop all action. Wendy, if you can, move on to the next slide. Thank you. So just to clarify the difference between standard breathing space and those that are in mental health crisis, what you've got there, you've got the two different categories. As I said earlier, those in mental health crisis, the moratorium is for much longer. For those entering standard breathing space, you can only enter one a year, and there's a statutory review period halfway through that breathing space that would last for 60 days to ensure that the person is engaging with the debt advisor. There's an opportunity, should that not be happening, that could be cancelled, and that would automatically come to an end. And again, on the other side, there isn't a midway review, but the treatment must be confirmed every 20 to 30 days that they're still in a mental health crisis. Thank you, Wendy. If you can just move on. Thank you. So in terms of eligibility for breathing space, it's anyone who's resident in England or Wales. They need to have a qualifying debt, but there is no limit. They need to not be subject to a debt relief order or be an undischarged bankrupt or be subject to an interim order or an individual voluntary arrangement. They couldn't have already entered breathing space, so they can't already be subject to a breathing space moratorium, and it has to be have ended more than 12 months before the start of a new application. Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, if you can move on. So in terms of qualifying debts, it is all sort of what you would imagine, payday loans, personal loans, overdraft utility bills, where they're in arrears, mortgage or rent arrears, store cards, credit cards. In terms of what that means for a local authority, because obviously we're a creditor as well as, obviously looking at it from the side of the debtor, but this will mean council tax arrears, housing benefit overpayments, unless these have been created due to fraud, business rates debts where you've got a sole trader. Businesses that are in a limited company debts cannot be part of breathing space. Sundry invoices, so all of our fees and charges, commercial rents that we have on individuals, they can all be part of breathing space along with car parking fines and housing rents. So they're the sort of debts that will fall into breathing space. There's a large list on the next slide, Wendy, if you could move on, of debts that will be excluded from breathing space. So if someone has entered a moratorium and they've got ongoing charges, so for instance, utility bills, council tax bills, they've got to continue to make payments for their ongoing obligations. It will only support the arrears, so they would need to continue to pay ongoing charges. Taxes, duties and national insurance contributions, they're all excluded. There's other debts like court fines, repayment of advances from universal credit, they will all be excluded from breathing space. We've got the full list there. Wendy, sorry, if you could move on, please. Thank you. So, well, how will it work? Well, we will receive an email notification from the insolvency service that will tell us the person has entered into breathing space. The moment we receive that notification, as a local authority, because we will be a creditor, we will need to put a hold on that debt for 60 days unless it's flagged to us as someone who's in mental health crisis, in which case that would go on to for a longer hold. Whilst we put those debts on hold, we cannot take recovery action, and we're not allowed to engage with the debtor whilst they're seeking advice over their debts. If we've started court action, we've got to stop, and any liaison that we need to have must be through the debt advice provider. And then the debt advisor will work with the debtor regarding the debt management solution to look at identifying a suitable outcome that will achieve the aims of sorting their debts. Sorry, I think I'm going to lose my system in a minute. I might have to dial on to my other computer, so bear with me a second. So if we can just carry on, Wendy, sorry, if you can just move on to the next slide. So from a debtor's perspective, obviously, if they've engaged with a debt advisor, then they will need to provide accurate information to them. They cannot deliberately withhold relevant information. They must pay all ongoing liabilities for the full period of the moratorium. They're not allowed to access more than £500 in credit, either solely or jointly. They must tell the debt advisor of any changes in their circumstances. They need to inform the debt advisor of any debts that are found after the moratorium starts. And then you've got additional information that must be provided if someone is in mental health crisis. If you can move on, Wendy. So this slide, I think, sort of sets out quite clearly how the scheme will work. So I'm just logging on, 2 seconds. I'm just going to log on before I lose you on to my other system. Yeah, so it sets out the outcome. So obviously there's 60 days protection. So I'm just coming on to the other system and I'm going to dial out.
Just bear with us, everybody, until Libby comes back in. Thank you.
Have you got me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right.
I've been on too many meetings today. My charger won't charge sufficiently. So sorry, going back. Right, this slide sets out how the breathing space will work in terms of the protections that will happen during the 60 days, and then what the outcomes of that debt management solution could be. So you've got it could result in bankruptcy, a voluntary arrangement, a debt management plan, or a debt relief order. So they're the sort of 4 outcomes. At the minute, as mentioned right at the beginning, one of the other government aims is to bring in a statutory repayment plan, statutory debt repayment plan, but that isn't actually legislation at the moment. So what you have is a debt management plan. What we don't know whether that will be a 5th option or whether that will replace the debt management plan. Wendy, if you can just move on to the next slide. So what the difference between a debt management plan and a statutory is that we're, as a creditor, we're not required to accept the proposal. So it doesn't have the legs on it that it would do if it was a statutory debt payment plan, because we would be bound by a statutory one as opposed to the debt management plan. So if, for instance, the proposal was a payment term that a creditor wasn't willing to accept, and they didn't accept that proposal, then that wouldn't go any further. We wouldn't be bound by that outcome. But because the government are looking to introduce a statutory debt repayment plan, it's likely that I can see more debts would end up going down that route alongside the bankruptcy or the debt relief order, which are binding. So sorry, Wendy, if you can just move on again for me, please. So just to explain what a statutory debt payment plan is, it was intended to be introduced at the same time as breathing space, but as yet there's been no date or of consultation regarding that. They are looking, the government are considering that anyone bound by a statutory debt payment plan, that these debts could span 7 to 10 years. The creditor would only receive 90% of the payment, and 10% would be retained by the insolvency service. And as a creditor, for example, as a local authority, we've got lots of different types of debts. We could have someone who could have a council tax debt, a business rates debt, they could have a rent debt, and also a fees and charge. We would just be treated as one creditor. They wouldn't recognise the individual debt, and therefore we would just get one payment against all the debts owed, and it would be for the council to decide how it would want to distribute that payment against the debts owed. But of course that isn't law yet, and as soon as we've got more information on that, I will share that with you. But it is the government's intention that they looking to introduce this alongside breathing space. So I do expect that at some time this will follow. If we can just move on to the next slide, please, Wendy. So what I've put here is the links to the some guidance and legislation for you. These slides, I'm happy for these slides to be circulated. So for those who are interested, can access more information. This is new. We are obviously been preparing our team for going live, and we've been working. This is a cross-council piece of work to bring people up to speed. We're having to adapt our systems in order to make sure we put holds on accounts and how we manage the interactions with the insolvency service and communicate back with them from when they notify us that someone has entered into breathing space. We have to provide and respond to them with what debts are owed by that person quite promptly. So there is going to be quite a bit of work depending on the volume on the local authority to make sure it provides accurate and up-to-date information with the insolvency service, as well as making sure that it puts debts on hold whilst that person is engaging with breathing space. We don't have any ideas on numbers. It could be quite high considering the level of indebtedness, and obviously this does provide an alternative. I don't know if you remember an earlier speech by when Citizens Advice came in. This is something that one of their volunteers had been actively lobbying government over, about the need to have this breathing space, this moratorium where debts are frozen in order to allow debtors to access debt advice without things escalating any further. So I think it will be a positive measure that will be good in helping to address and people to access debt advice. I have got at the end any questions. Apologies for my technological issues, and hopefully it wasn't too disrupted for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby. No, it was fine. That's great. Well, it sounds like a really good scheme to me, this, but who am I to know that? You're the expert on this, and it seems as if it's a good thing generally. Is that have I got that right?
Yes, yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's a positive thing. It's what a lot of people, in debt, interest rates accruing, people will often, rob Peter to pay Paul. They're juggling the person who's sort of almost at their door will be the person that they will tend to respond to when people's debts get out of hand. So I think giving this breathing space will be a positive thing for people.
Thank you, Libby. Right, we've got some questions now from Councillor Rickson. Marianne, thank you.
Libby, it sounds like you're being landed with an awful lot more work, as seems to be what commonly happens. Do you have the resource to be able to deal with all this? Because you just get lumbered with more and more that you have to deal with.
To be honest, we don't know how resourceful this is going to be. The Institute of Professional Body, IRRV, the Institute of Rating, Revenues and Valuation, is lobbying government over new burdens because local authorities, this is going to put additional work on local authorities as a creditor, because we have obviously quite sort of different debts. We're not like a lot of creditors where if you're a credit card company, you will have one data set and you will be able to easily identify whether someone owes money. In terms of local authority, we've got lots of different, we're quite diverse. We have lots of things that we collect money for. So that means lots of different systems that have to be checked every time we receive a notification through from the Insolvency Service. We are working with our colleagues in Exeter and Teignbridge to try and develop as automated system as possible that we'll be utilising our firm steps so that we can capture this information and feed it back without having, to make it quite burdensome on ourselves to administer. But yeah, it is something we need to keep a watching brief on, but obviously it's a law, we've got to implement it. There will be a positive measure though. I do see it as a positive step though for people who are in debt, that they can access and have this moratorium, which often people do need. But yes, it is something that we are recognising that it could end up creating us extra work.
Yeah, thank you. Is that all right, Marianne? Did you need to come back with anything else? Yeah, I think it's important to keep it, and it's important that you let us know. Well, let everyone know if it does get too much and if the resources are just too limited. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Woodward, Tony, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Megan. Just on process between ourselves and our debtor, if we're the creditor, it seems that the debtor has to apply themselves for the enter into the arrangements with the Insolvency Service. But if we have a debtor, as I took it, we're not allowed to have further contact with the debtor. Can we refer them to the Insolvency Service? It seems an odd situation where if there's a debt that we may not be able to tell them that the best thing they can do is take up this breathing space. That's wondering how that would work if we have a creditor and what interaction we can actually have with them.
What will happen is a debtor would access a debt advisor, so someone say from Citizens Advice, and then they would trigger the breathing space by registering that with the Insolvency Service. And then once we get notification from the Insolvency Service, we then have to identify the debts that debtor owes, and then we have to then put a hold on, and then we feed that information back to the insolvency service, who will then relay that back to the debt advisor, the registered debt advisor. So it's something that we will need to consider about how we promote that there's breathing space, and where people have got high levels of debt, that we make people aware that there is these new regulations, so that they can seek professional debt advice. And you know, we do that as part of our normal work anyway, by referring people through to citizens advice. Obviously, it's something we need to make them aware of these new regulations, and that would be something that we would need to do as part of our sort of normal engagement over debt recovery. So yeah, I would expect that our teams would be referring people who are financially struggling, say for instance to pay their council tax, or in arrears with their housing rents, that as part of our normal work we would be making them aware of the new breathing space, and consider referring them to a debt advisor.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Just a quick one from me, Libby. Have you had any indication from Citizens Advice whether they're going to be able to cope with the extra work, or is it we just don't know yet? Really, it depends how it goes. Have you had any indications from them?
No, I haven't yet. I do need to try to make contact with Tim before this meeting to sort of get an update from him. But no, we haven't had ideas on what the take-up of this will be. I expect it will be slow to start off with, but then it may well pick up as this becomes more known to debtors or to people in debt.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any more speakers? I can't see anyone else, and we've got up to our 2 hours, so we're not doing too badly today, are we? Anybody else want to ask any questions of Libby before we move on to the next item? No? And Libby, you'll be happy to send out that presentation, will you, through Sue? And then it can go out with the minutes, perhaps. Is that all right?
Yes, Sue's already got it, so she can send that out. So no, that's absolutely fine. And if anyone's got any further questions, then I'm happy to for them to email me direct and for me to answer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And likewise, we'll probably bring something back in a few months' time, and we can give an update on what the take-up has been and what we've learned so far from
that would be useful.
These regulations have gone live.
Yeah, thank you. I've just noticed that Councillor Hall is wanting to speak. Thanks, Ian.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Libby. Really, really interesting listening to this. And again, there's been a lot of threads regarding the mental health as well through this. And I can see the real plus point that individuals and families who actually have got a full stress container, they can actually look at one of the areas that can release some of that excess stress in this. As Marion said, with you as a very, very valuable department, and ensuring that you guys aren't overwhelmed with this, managing this out, as in signposting, communicating out, is going to have to be managed very, very carefully. Because I can see this potentially becoming a little bit of a tsunami, because we are actually in a position that we're hopefully going to be carrying on a good journey out of COVID, but we know that the impacts of COVID and unemployment, etc., are going to be rising. And I'm just really, really a little bit cautious how this is going to be managed out to ensure that those in need are getting the necessary early support as soon as possible. Really, it's an area of concern more for you as a team than anything else, but I do welcome this, and I thank you ever so much for a very clear presentation.
Thank you, Ian. Libby, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are trying to recognise that there is a lot of work we need to do around sort of financial resilience. Obviously, John's touched upon that sort of poverty strategy and the issues around indebtedness, making sure that people are accessing all their incomes, getting them resilient so that they can manage their affairs going forward, and realise that that is multifaceted. There's lots of elements to that. We've obviously started our journey on that with, we've now got funding for 2 financial resilience officers, albeit only for 2 years for each post, but that is us about creating capacity to support that work, which recognises is really important with obviously the impact of COVID. We can see our caseload on council tax reduction. We've got 1,000 more than we had pre-COVID, or over 1,000 more people now claiming. So we know that people are financially struggling. So, you know, I don't see that work slowing up. Obviously, with the furlough scheme, as that scheme ends, there could be more impact, but hopefully the economy will help to save some of those jobs as restrictions start to lift. But yeah, it is something that we are, obviously you've got my council tax collection hat with ministering benefits, so we're right in the sort of centre of seeing what's going on, and working very closely to make sure early intervention with people, identifying where people are struggling early on, whether that's through their council tax or through other debts, that we're getting them referred in and looking at how we can provide that wider support in helping them. But yeah, it's yeah, I can't underestimate, you know, there is a lot to do, but we will just have to keep a watching brief on that in terms of how we manage our resources and workload.
Yeah, thank you, Libby. I think I've got Councillor Howe wants to speak. Mike?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just trying to think proactively and ignoring everything you've already said, Libby, although if you've covered this before, sorry, I was late in and everything else. Do we analyse, keep control, track our council tax payees that consistently are late? Because often, like everything, there's so many subsets of people that are struggling these days, but there are people that will not go anywhere. They will struggle on, they'll keep struggling, but they'll get a few days later each month, their council tax is due and everything else. But they absolutely do not want to go to anyone for any help. And I'm just wondering if there's any sort of monitoring system of watching people that are consistently late or growing late, you know, etc. Those that refer themselves, great, at least we can give them the help then, etc. But I'm more worried about a small subset that don't want help, if you get my meaning, or think they're putting a burden on everyone else by asking for help, but are struggling every day. And it's that small little subset I'm worried about. And I just want to see if we've got that mechanism in there of just noticing it, shall we say.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, so for your chair, if you're happy for me to come back. Yeah, it's something that obviously sort of debt prevention, looking at our arrears, people sort of people repeatedly going into arrears, that engagement. Yes, those that contact us, that's easy because they're engaging with us. The harder to reach are those that don't. One of the measures that we introduced a number of years ago was about doing outbound calling. So once a debt gets to court stage, before we would refer it on for further action, we will try and ring that debtor and make contact with them to try and engage with them over what issues they may have over payment, and try and work with them. That does yield some results, but doesn't always. Some people don't want to, you know, engage with us. So when people do, we're there ready to deal with them. We do reach out. We will sometimes go and visit people if we're really concerned, if there's a sort of a year-on-year issue. So yes, and we've got lots of different sort of systems to, or ways we analyze our data to try and identify patterns and trends, and you know, sort of those that are repeatedly non-payment, but then there's some that notoriously will pay once they're forced to pay, and that suits them because actually our court costs are relatively low, and for some people in managing their cash flow, that's their choice. And you know, some people will happily pay on a final notice, others would be mortified to get a final notice. So we can't make assumptions over why people don't pay or will pay once it gets to a certain point, versus those that will be burying their heads because they're in this issue. I mean, you know, some people will delay paying council tax because it doesn't increase, unlike other creditors where they've got interest being accrued. They may pay that one over council tax and then will pay council tax later down the line. So it's, yeah, there's realised in life that everyone's very different about the way that they deal, so we mustn't sort of try and categorise people too much. But yes, we do quite a lot of work, and I think that's part of the reason why we've been quite successful in terms of collection levels, because we do quite a lot of proactive work rather than just putting a one-size-fits-all approach. That helps.
Thank you, Libby. Is that all right, Mike?
Yeah, no, like anything, it's always that, isn't it? We don't want to put everyone in one bucket, shall we say. There are so many different reasons and causes. Yeah. But I've just come back to when I joined the council originally many years ago, and I know I had two tenants in my ward. One was an old vet from the RAF who struggled every day and wouldn't claim a penny from anybody and kept saying he didn't want any help. But he really did struggle just to buy his food. And another who was doing extremely well on his social security and all the rest of it, who had the biggest TV you've ever seen in your life, TV, cigarettes, latest phone, you know, alcohol every night, and was claiming every penny. I don't care about the one that was claiming every penny that had everything under the sun, but I did very much care about the poor old timer who wouldn't claim and struggled every day of his life. So, you know, as I say, it's just those quiet ones I worry about more, shall we say. But thank you.
I think that's an age-old problem, isn't it? It will be with us always, really. But it's good to raise it. Thank you. Yeah. I don't think we've got any more questions for Libby. So if we move on to the last item, everybody be pleased to know. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you very much, Libby, for this really helpful presentation, and you brought it to our attention in advance of it actually becoming into law. So the final item is the date of the next meeting. Now, I just want to say something about this. The next meeting was arranged to be held on Monday the 10th of May. That's when we were going to have the original meeting on the 12th of April. But following the postponements of the last two meetings, could I suggest that as it's only 2 weeks from now, this May meeting be cancelled so that the next meeting will now be the 14th of June at the usual time of 11 o'clock? I just wanted people's comments on that. Do you think that would be a good idea? Just to cancel the next meeting 2 weeks time? Yes. Yeah. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's another 6 weeks to the next meeting. It will give us a little bit of a breathing space as well. Thank you. So future meetings will then be the 14th of June, the 19th of July, 20th of September, and the 22nd of November, and then we're back at 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry we had to change to the afternoon, but it was just that some of the officers wouldn't have been available this morning because they had other commitments, and we needed the officers here. So thank you. So that brings our meeting to a close, and I'd like to thank everyone for participating, including any members of the public watching online. Can I remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Megan.